Good afternoon. Today is Tuesday, August 30th, and I hereby call to order the Senate Study Committee on Excellence, Innovation, and Technology at Historically Black Colleges and Universities. And first, I would like to ask Senator Anderson to please lead us in a prayer.
Thank you, Senator. Let us bow. Gracious God, we give you thanks for your goodness, for your mercy. We give you thanks for your loving kindness. We ask God that your presence would be in our midst so that as we conduct the business, the very important business of this study committee, we pray that your wisdom, your power, and your strength will be with us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Before we get into the heat of things, I'd like to just I would like to say, joining me today are my amazing Senate colleagues who have been appointed to serve on this study committee. And I'm going to ask each if they would just quickly introduce themselves, and we'll start with you and work its way down if we can.
Thank you, Senator Halpern. This monitor is in front of me, so I'm going to stand up. How about that? So my name is Tanya Anderson. I am the senator for Senate District 43, which covers portions of DeKalb, Rockdale, and Newton. I am an HBCU grad. We just beat Howard University this Saturday. Hey. And so I've been in the Senate since 2017. Prior to that was in the House. So I'm delighted and honored to serve on this committee. Thank you.
Good afternoon. State Senator Freddie Powell Sims, Southwest Georgia. District 12, and I have 11 counties. I too am an HBCU graduate, the Fort Valley State University, and extremely proud of my university and the legacy that it brings.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Jason Anavatarte. I'm the senator from District 31. Honored to be here with Madam Chair, you, and joined the Senate last year. So on the end of my first term, I represent currently Paulding County, Polk County, and Haralson County. Born and raised in Atlanta, grew up in DeKalb County, and honored to be here. Thank you.
I am Senator Valencia C. I represent both Clayton and Fayette counties. I am so honored to be on this study committee once again, and I look forward to hearing from each of you all to understand better and help the others understand better how valuable HBCUs are. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I am, of course, Senator Sonia Halpern. I represent the 39th district and am really thrilled to be able to chair this study committee and work with my colleagues as we try to think about our HBCUs in new ways and really think about what kind of things that the state can do to better support each one of our schools. I want to also convey my thanks and sincere gratitude to our Lieutenant Governor, Jeff Duncan, for his efforts with formulating this study committee and for believing in the absolute necessity and purpose of the knowledge and the insights which will be shared with us and that will help us identify particularly some recommendations and outcomes we would like to see coming out of this. I'm going to thank our very capable Senate press and House media staff. This meeting is available to the public via live stream on the House broadcast webpage. And let's talk about HBCUs just a little bit. The Higher Education Act of 1965 defines a historically Black college or university, an HBCU, as any historically Black college or university that was established prior to 1964, whose principal mission was and is the education of Black Americans, and that is accredited by a nationally recognized accrediting agency or association determined by the Secretary of Education to be a reliable authority as to the quality of training offered, or is, according to such an agency or association, making reasonable progress towards accreditation. And according to the National Center for Education Statistics, which is the primary federal entity for collecting and analyzing data related to education, the state of Georgia has 10 HBCUs that I will recognize now. We've got Albany State University in Albany, Georgia, Clark Atlanta University here in Atlanta, Fort Valley State University in Fort Valley, Interdenominational Theological Center here in Atlanta, Morehouse College and Morehouse School of Medicine, both here in Atlanta, Morris Brown College, Atlanta, Payne College in Augusta, Savannah State University in Savannah, and Spelman College here in Atlanta. And we've got several presidents or designees of each of these schools with us today, and I appreciate you being here. Within Georgia, so we have 10 HBCUs. In the country, there are 103. So we have a very large number of HBCUs right here in our state that are real assets to the state. And 3 of them are public institutions and 7 are private. And we will hear from, over the course of our study committee, presidents from each of these schools, including 3 who are here with us today. What is the purpose of this study committee? Well, we are really looking for new ways that the state can support and promote the growth and sustainability of our HBCUs, and also really specifically looking at how do we make sure that our HBCUs are able to drive the workforce needs of the future for today and tomorrow, and really be able to connect these students who graduate from these institutions to the jobs that will be happening in the 21st century. So in some ways, we're really thinking about how do we take these great institutions and modernize them for the world that we're living in today, and make sure that we are not forgetting their importance to the state. I offer a heartfelt thank you to each and single one of you for being present today for today's proceedings. And without further ado, we will move directly into the agenda as set forth. So we will first hear from Mr. Fred Jones, who's the Senior Director of Public Policy and Advocacy for Southern Education Foundation.
Good afternoon. My name is Fred Jones. I'm the Senior Director of Public Policy and Advocacy at the Southern Education Foundation. Senator Halpern, I want to thank you for inviting us to testify. And members of the committee, I also want to thank you for sitting on this committee and hearing us today. I am not an HBCU grad, but I'm married to a Bison. And I'm also an UNCF alum. I used to work for the United Negro College Fund as the Director of Government Affairs back in the day, and I understand my a new representative is also here as well. So without further ado, I just wanted to get started and provide you guys with some brief remarks. So make sure this goes forward. Just more about the Southern Education Foundation. The Southern Education Foundation is a pre-K through 16 organization. We have a footprint in 17 states, and our principal mission is to advance creative solutions to ensure equity and excellence in education for students of color and low-income students in the South. We were founded in 1867, just after the Civil War, to help promote educational equity for the formerly enslaved population and low-income whites all throughout the South. Our vision is, we envision a world where every student, regardless of background, enjoys an education that propels them toward an opportunity-rich life that they deserve. Do you guys have access to the PowerPoint?
No, our monitors do not seem to be.
Darian, can you
working.
pass out the presentations? Give me a moment.
Okay, we just lost it over there too. So, okay. There we go.
Rely so much on technology. But just to reiterate, we are one of the longest standing education and equity organizations in the country, coming just after the Civil War to help students of color, particularly Black students and Black teachers, develop an education system in the South. We're headquartered here in Atlanta, Georgia, but again, we have a footprint across 17 states. These are our states that we represent. We are in all the traditional Southern states, plus Missouri, Delaware, Texas, and Oklahoma. And we have a very expansive view of what we consider to be the South. And that's because we think it's incredibly important to make sure we represent states that used to have a legal form of enslavement. And that's the reason why we're in 17 states. We also have 3 prongs of our work. We have a research arm, advocacy and government affairs arm, and also leadership development. And again, we're a pre-K through post-secondary organization. Just for general additional context, the Southern Education Foundation helped form and/or support more than half of all the HBCUs across the country, mostly through financial support in their original founding, including Clark Atlanta University and Spelman College. Booker T. Washington used to serve on our board, and we helped fund Tuskegee University as well. We have 20% of our current board are HBCU presidents. We also actively engage in convening groups of HBCUs to study institutional effectiveness and capacity building. We also help faculty at HBCUs place op-eds on different projects in which they may be experts on. And we help also fundraise with HBCUs across the country. Most recently, we helped secure $1 million for 5 HBCUs to help develop liberal arts education, specifically classics. As Senator Halpern just went through, she gave you the official definition of HBCUs, but it's essentially any institution that was founded principally on serving African-American students, and that was formed prior to 1964. This is very different than minority serving institutions, which are essentially defined as the percent of specific populations. So Hispanic serving institutions or predominantly Black institutions, these oftentimes are institutions that were created after 1964, but is built on defining itself based off the population it serves. We also know that there are some HBCUs that are majority white, just because of the way that was principally, because of their mission base that were founded prior to 1964. Now we talk about the actual value proposition of HBCUs. HBCUs essentially make up about 3% of all 2- and 4-year institutions across the country, but they graduate 18% of African-Americans, undergraduates, and almost a quarter of all African-Americans with STEM bachelor's degrees. We know that about 50% of the Black educator workforce are graduates of HBCUs. And additionally, in 2020, there's 101 accredited HBCUs nationwide, but as Senator Halpern also mentioned, there's a few that were recently gained accreditation, so that's definitely up to about 103 now. Some key stats I wanted to go over. I think it's incredibly important that we talk about the makeup and the types of students that attend HBCUs. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I wanted to provide some visuals. The graduation rates of most of the HBCUs in Georgia here, listed in descending order. Also the percentage of Pell Grant students and the overall enrollment number. We also included University in Georgia here as a comparison. And this information was taken from the U.S. Department of Education on their college scorecard. We know that many HBCUs actually accept and enroll students irrespective of, I won't say irrespective, but a lot of the students are low-income students, and that makes them Pell Grant eligible most of the time. We see that there's a direct inverse relationship between the percent of Pell Grant students and the graduation rates. And we look at just here with Payne College having a graduation of 23%, but 91% of their students are Pell eligible. We have Spelman College, about 76% graduation rate, with 45% of their students being Pell eligible. And then we do the comparison to the University of Georgia, with roughly 85% graduation rate, and just 17% of the students are Pell eligible. And Pell eligibility is a proxy for socioeconomic status. But if you dig into the stats a little bit more, United Negro College Fund released a report in 2014 that if you control for socioeconomic status and also academic preparation, HBCUs actually graduate a larger percentage of students controlling for those two factors. So we have to ask ourselves, what is the actual mission of the institutions that are serving students today? Some additional information here about the economic impact of HBCUs, specifically here in Georgia and also nationwide. Annually, we know HBCUs in Georgia make up about 1.3 billion in economic impact. This information comes from United Negro College Fund. The employment impact is about 12,000 jobs. Lifetime earnings for graduates graduating from HBCU here in Georgia is about $9.1 billion. This is the most recent information that we have on economic impact. However, this chart to the right actually comes from the Department of Education that looks at the public HBCUs specifically, the labor income impact, which is just earnings from employment, and also the jobs. This one's severely outdated, 2006, but the numbers remain pretty staggering. What we can find and see here is HBCUs contribute millions of dollars to the local economy, local and state economy. And this information is taken per year here. We also know that HBCUs on average have lower endowments compared to non-HBCUs. And endowments is essentially a way to provide financial stability, provide innovation at the institutions, aid to students in need. And what we see here is a drastic difference between some of the public HBCUs endowment size and comparing that to the University of Georgia. I mean, they're fractions here. Most recently, I just want to cover some of the efforts some of your neighboring states have recently taken in terms of investing and supporting HBCUs. In Alabama, they've created a Office of Minority Affairs, which has established an HBCU co-op program. This is essentially a workforce development opportunity where HBCUs are partnered with the business industry to provide work experience for HBCU students and recent graduates. The state of North Carolina has established the Minority Serving Institutions Advisory Board, which thinks and tries to develop ways in which the state can specifically build capacity for the HBCU institutions in North Carolina. Most recently, we know that the state of Maryland settled a lawsuit providing over $500 million to the 4 HBCUs in their state after they looked at the disinvestments that the state has made over the last couple of decades. And then Tennessee specifically recently passed legislation to strengthen the institutional capacity of the HBCUs in Tennessee. Just a few things I want to leave the committee to consider. Today was just really meant to be a landscape analysis, looking at this from a macro perspective, is just think about investing in the research capacity itself of HBCUs. A few years ago, the Southern Education Foundation put on a conference, really a pre-K through 16 conference. And we had a very difficult time trying to identify professors from HBCUs that could really delve into their research and research capability, most recently in the education domain. And through that experience, our focus group's experience and experience of our board, we know that specific investments in research opportunities is incredibly important for HBCUs all across the country, but here specifically also in Georgia. We also want to think about supporting the institutional effectiveness. I showed some information about endowments, student aid, and curriculum development. Again, we're saying this with skin in the game. We have taken responsibility in helping a number of HBCUs specifically fundraise for these efforts, which I shared earlier, and we continue to do that. We also work very closely with a number of HBCU presidents and C-suite leaders at these institutions to think about how we as a Southern Education Foundation can help support their ability to grow. We also think about investing in the development of education and innovation improvements to help the transition from high school to college. And then we also think it's important to explore potential historic underfunding or current state funding gaps between HBCUs and non-HBCUs. And we think it's incredibly important to grow the economy here. We know this is a very business-friendly state. We have to ensure that we're developing and graduating graduates who can thrive in this workforce. And it takes more investments in HBCUs who have a mission to serving African-American students and low-income students of color. I just want to leave you guys with some policy resources that we have available on our website. We have our public policy priorities, different research that we've conducted over the years, specifically on HBCUs and higher education and what states should be doing to invest in minority serving institutions and HBCUs in particular. And here's my contact information if you want to discuss anything further. I have my colleague Darian as well, who's here with me. Unfortunately, I cannot stay too long, but I'm open to answering any questions or staying around. I'm not quite sure what you would like, Senator, but thank you for the opportunity to present today.
Thank you very much. I see we do have some questions for you. Senator C.
Thank you for that awesome presentation. While I introduce myself as representing both Clayton and Fayette counties, we do have Clayton State University, which I recognize is not an HBCU, but I wanted to know if you all knew that this semester we have 3,241 undergrads Black, 380 graduate students Black, a total of 3,622 Black students, making up 63% of the school's population. I just want the record to reflect that I do represent Clayton State University in Clayton County, Georgia, and the numbers that are growing consistently. I have helped many of my colleagues with their students that are having any issues over at Clayton State, and we are very proud to have those numbers right there in my district. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Sims.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation and for your availability to us today. Question number one, I want you to go back to future considerations for the committee. The first one, invest in the research capacity of HBCUs. Would you repeat the statement about professors and them not being available to or amenable to? Tell me, what was your statement? And then tell me why. What's the reasoning?
Sure. Is this on? Okay, yeah, great, thank you. No, and let me clarify my statement. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, SCF used to host, every other year, we would host an issues forum, an education issues forum in different places across the South. Most recently, that happened in 2018 in Little Rock, Arkansas. And typically, these are research conferences. When we put on this new research conference, we had a very difficult time being able to find professors from HBCUs who had research specifically around education policies, around education reform. So at the higher ed level, in the pre-K level, at the K-12 level. Not to say that they're not out there, we know that they are, but it becomes much more difficult to recruit because a lot of the HBCUs, based off of that anecdotal story, the focus groups that we have with presidents today, in our engagement, we have noticed that there's just not a lot of research capability and capacity at HBCUs. Most of it is around making sure you can deliver the instruction, and rightfully so, but also making sure that there's enough aid for the students who are coming to the institutions. The ability to build up the research profiles has been difficult to grow and develop at HBCUs due to primarily lack of investments, but also due to the financial stability. And we find that it's incredibly important, especially in a state like Georgia, where it's very business friendly. We know that STEM fields, for example, are incredibly important. So mechanical engineering, science, mathematics, all that stuff is incredibly important to growing the economy. And we know that if you compare the research capacity of HBCUs to non-HBCUs, there's a drastic difference. Now, we didn't run that number, but I'm sure it's comparable to the graph that I showed on endowments in terms of states investing, or even states and the federal government investing in the research capacity of HBCUs versus non-HBCUs. So that's my point. It's incredibly important to make sure institutions themselves just have the ability to conduct their own original research. And so you don't have to worry about tenure or other components in which the school may require. It's important to have the opportunity and flexibility for the institutions themselves to invest in their own research capacity. And I know that there's some HBCUs presidents potentially here who can probably speak to that specifically, but that's been our experience. We know that more has to be done when you compare like a University of Georgia or a Georgia Tech, and other flagship universities that may be in the surrounding states, such as the University of South Carolina versus South Carolina State. It's incredibly different amounts of money in which the state is investing in the research capacity of HBCUs versus non-HBCUs.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Senator Anna Vitarte.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Jones, thanks for being here today. Could you speak a little bit more in depth about what the state of Tennessee did in terms of strengthening institutional capacity?
Yeah.
Just in terms of what was the policy change or what was the law that they passed? Just a little bit of specifics about that.
Yeah, so this it's something I actually learned of recently. And so there's two things I want to bring your attention to. Mostly this is around having a dedicated state public opportunity and resource for the institutions in Tennessee to actually receive feedback from the leaders at the institutions and the students that attend them, and be able to provide recommendations to the state to support those individual institutions. That's primarily my understanding. I don't know from the firsthand knowledge, but the legislation provided an opportunity for the institutions and the students to formally provide feedback to the state to provide recommendations to support those institutions. And there's also, I don't know if you saw it, but they're exploring essentially their historical underfunding in that state as well. It's come out that they believe that their state has underfunded HBCUs by about, more than $500 million as well, similar to what happened in Maryland.
If you could, just to follow, and I appreciate your response. I mean, if you could get us specifics, maybe
Sure.
what happened and share that with the committee, I think that would be very helpful and interesting to learn more about.
I can provide specifics. I can follow up with that.
Thank you.
Yep.
I don't know, my mic is, oh, it is working. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Jones, thank you for the presentation. And I want to say that I'm really impressed by the fact that you took the time to put the economic impact of HBCUs in this presentation. Particularly, these are state HBCUs. However, we do know that the impact of HBCUs in Georgia, HBCU grads in Georgia happens the day that they step foot on campus. Parents send money. They come to the graduation, they stay in our hotels, they eat in our restaurants, they bring the whole family. And so I just want to say thank you for pointing out this economic impact. Not only that, but I have escorted one of our department heads to the AU Center to see that the economic impact of that peach on that film happens at an HBCU in Georgia. So I appreciate that. And I don't know if you want to put that in there as well. I ain't trying to take out your presentation,
Okay.
but I think it's very important that we continue to put that in front of people so that everyone understands the importance of HBCUs. And then we produce those CEOs and we produce presidents and we produce all those things that bring an economic impact to the state of Georgia. So thank you so much.
I see no other questions. I wanted to thank you again for presenting to us today. And one of the things that I'm noticing on the slide with the recent state efforts to support HBCUs is that 3 of the 4 states that you've just shared with us about literally are our neighboring states. So I think that that just underscores how timely the work of this committee is, as states all around us are really thinking about their HBCUs and better understanding ways that they can support them or how they have or haven't in the past. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you. And unfortunately, I do have to run, but my
Yes.
colleague will stay. If there's any follow-up, I'm happy to follow up with you all, and we'll definitely make sure we get that additional information.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. While we transition to our next speaker, which will be President Matthew Williams from the Interdenominational Theological Center, I wanted to just give Senator Miller an opportunity to introduce himself.
Thank you very much, Senator. I'm pleased to be a member, ex officio member of this committee, and the impact that HBCUs have not only in Georgia in general, but Metro Atlanta in particular, in the cities they range, whether we're talking about Payne or we're talking about Savannah, or we're talking about Middle Georgia, throughout the state, just the impact that it has on both students, economy, and the overall well-being of our state. I'm keenly interested in some of the barriers to entry and some of the challenges that students face and the colleges face, and how we might approach those and how we might address those, not only as a governmental entity, but as a society, as a state. So thank you for letting me join you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I also want to just acknowledge, because I know that we've got another legislator who's out here. So I just want to recognize Representative Edna Jackson. Thank you for being here as well. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Williams, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Senator Halpern, and to this committee. Thank you for the opportunity to address you and to talk a little bit about my graduate alma mater. I'm originally from Chicago, and about 23 years ago, I jumped in a rusty Honda and drove about 800 miles to Georgia. What's that? Oh, is that right? It was rusty. It was rusty. But I often say that coming to Atlanta and coming to the ITC, aside from marrying my wife, Alexis, was the best decision I made in my adult life. And so I'm happy to talk about my alma mater, both where we've been, who we are, and where we're going. Again, thank you. So the ITC was established in 1958 as a joint venture of, at the time, 4 pre-existing freestanding seminaries that were affiliated with different denominations. They came together as a joint venture, really, at the time, 1958, a hot period in the middle of the 20th century, especially here in the cradle of the civil rights movement in Atlanta. And the key issue was, how do we prepare quality leadership for these anchor institutions that we call the church, that in Black communities throughout Georgia and throughout the nation serve not just as places for worship on Sunday morning, but as social service centers, centers for organizing around social justice and making a broader social impact in the communities that they serve. We're located here in the Atlanta University Center, right next door to our neighbor Morris Brown and neighbors Morris Brown and Clark Atlanta University. We are the only historically Black theological school in the state of Georgia that's accredited. And we are dually accredited by the Association of Theological Schools, which is the accreditor of record for theological education, and SAC-COC. And we are the largest freestanding historically Black theological school in the US. There are actually 6 total, including the ITC in the United States. We have historically operated as a national incubator for faith-rooted leadership, including but not limited to clergy and pastors who operate at this intersection between faith and social justice. And we've been a seedbed for pioneering scholars, theological leaders, activists, organizers in a variety of fields. But we boast many of the firsts in certain fields in theological education in the academy. We are the first home to the Martin Luther King Center for Nonviolent Social Change. And again, we've had a long legacy of cultivating the kinds of leaders who've been transformative in and beyond the church. On that note, I want to highlight an interview that I did before I became president with students at the ITC. And I asked them, why did you come to ITC? And one of them really voiced the sentiments of the student body at the time, or the students who were gathered at the time. Some of you all may recognize James Woodall, who is one of our students finishing up. And what he said at the time was, I came to ITC to learn how to lead my people. The degree is a byproduct, I'll get that. But what he recognized was that he could not capably lead in the community without a deep understanding of the theology, of the faith, of the languages that people use to make meaning of their lives. And so to organize folks around common cause, he needed a deep understanding of the kind of motivation and the faith that gave people meaning in their lives. And we do that through degree programs, but also through social impact initiatives that do leadership education and community education and interventions beyond just the students who are in our degree programs. So we have 4 degree programs: a Master of Divinity, Master of Arts in Liturgical and Cultural Studies, a Master of Arts in Religion and Education, and a Doctor of Ministry degree. But then we have these public-facing social impact initiatives that have always been a part of ITC's legacy in the broader community in Atlanta, in Georgia, and beyond. So as an example, our Thriving Prophetic Congregations program works with 16 congregations in the state of Georgia who are exploring, how do we take our assets? Many of you know that the church in many of our communities is the largest landowner, the single largest landowner in many communities, and now are thinking about, how do we reimagine our assets in service to our historic mission in a way that serves the broader community, again, beyond just the kind of Sunday morning experiences that churches are known for. So what's important to know about ITC is that while we occupy just 10 acres on the west side of Atlanta, the ripple effects of the leadership that come out of ITC are expansive. Collectively, the 5 denominations that are affiliated with the ITC have a collective Black membership of 25 million. That's over half of the Black population in the US. And so our folks are located in strategic positions really throughout the church, both domestically and globally. And those churches, again, operate as more than just worship centers, but they operate as economic hubs, as community development hubs, as leadership development hubs, and really become, in many cases, the glue that holds communities together. We talk about our students as prophetic problem solvers. Who embody our mission of practicing justice and peace through a liberating and transforming spirituality. And ITC sits at a nexus of the Black church, unlike any other institution on these shores. And so our impact really comes in three ways. One, in the leaders that we prepare through our degree programs. Again, prophetic problem solvers who are prepared for transformational leadership in the pulpit, the parish, and the public square throughout Georgia and beyond, leading anchor institutions, including but not limited to churches. Many of our students who become chaplains operating in pastoral care become first responders in communities around issues of crisis. Many of you know that when it came to COVID-19, many of our alumni were those centers in communities that not only provided interventions with regard to vaccines, but also were reliable sources of information, so that when government needed to make interventions in communities to provide good information that would save people's lives, they came to clergy and they came to churches, again, as those anchor institutions. But our students, again, I'll tell you a quick story. Not too long ago, I had a conversation, actually a little while ago, before Mayor Andre Dickens ran for mayor. We had a conversation on the campus of Georgia Tech where we were talking about potential partnership between ITC and Georgia Tech. And he said, well, this seems like a good opportunity because I need you to know that Georgia Tech is much more than engineering. I said, that's good to know because what I need you to know is ITC is much more than preaching, right? Our students are in a variety of fields, public health, military and hospital chaplaincy. They are entrepreneurs, they are scholars and higher education administrators, nonprofit leaders and executives operating across a variety of fields, but understanding their activity in those fields, including the church, but beyond it, as ministry, right, as leadership, and doing that from a faith-rooted perspective. So the leaders that we prepare make a significant impact as the glue in communities. These impact initiatives that I mentioned a moment ago also prepare leadership and build the capacity of communities to solve their problems and co-create their future. And then finally, our campus footprint. ITC has always been a convening hub in Westside Atlanta for the faith community in the city and even beyond in the state. And I'll say I'll say something in a minute about the way in which we're even reimagining and forwarding that legacy, reimagining our 10 acres on the west side of Atlanta as a social impact hub in the heart of 30314. So on that note, I want to say a word about what we're calling ITC 2.0. I returned to my alma mater in 2019 after a period of working as leading a task force that was authorized by our board. And that task force was responding to this reality. This is the landscape of theological education in my mind. The ground has shifted, and many of the paths that we've used to move from one place to another, to pipeline leadership from one place to another, and to advance our goals from one place to another, the ground has shifted and washed out many of those pathways. And so in our field of theological education, everything is up for grabs. And institutions across the 270 accredited theological schools in the US and Canada are rethinking their models from top to bottom. And so we're in the process of doing that as well. And we were recently featured in the 2021 annual report of the largest philanthropic funder in the field of religion, that is the Lilly Endowment, as an exemplar of an institution that's rethinking its educational model alongside its institutional model from top to bottom to prepare the kinds of leaders that our communities need now, going back to that same question that initiated the institution in the first place. And so this is what we said as a task force, that while ITC's mission and vision to prepare the kind of leaders that our communities need is more urgent than ever, our mission and vision won't have a future unless we undergo a top to bottom overhaul of the institution. And that process started in 2019, which we began to call at the time ITC 2.0, which acknowledged that for many of our institutions, not just ITC, our educational models and our institutional models were built for a day that is long past. And COVID really revealed much of what was already underway in that regard. It wasn't that COVID initiated that reality. COVID just revealed that many of our institutions were built for a day that was long gone. And so for us, our redesign of the institution is holistic. From our institutional model and governance, we seated a new board under a new set of bylaws in May of 2020. Our educational design and platform having to do with moving away from a residential model, but to a hybrid delivery model, even coming out of being fully online. And we were moving into that even before COVID, but COVID came and just kicked us off a cliff and said, you're gonna do this full force. And now we're moving back into a hybrid model. And then also the operational backbone that's necessary to stand that new model up. We're also reimagining our campus as a live, work, play, pray, learn kind of environment that is a community integrated social impact hub that has on its footprint social enterprises that address issues of housing, of food security, excuse me, of mental health, and of environmental sustainability and energy burden, all of which have to do with the flesh and blood needs of communities, and which operates both as an opportunity for the ITC to build a sustainable revenue model, but also to build a kind of community impact that advances its legacy. And in 30314 addresses the flesh and blood needs of that community that we've assessed over the last few years, which we call the ITC 2.0 village. And so our challenges in this transition have been many. Our successes have also been many. We achieved a 10-year reaffirmation of accreditation from our primary accreditor, the Association of Theological School, which said that what's happening at ITC is instructive for the whole field of theological education. They said, I hope you're writing it down. I said, we're working too hard. We don't have much time, but we'll try. But we have these challenges that continue to kind of plague us as we continue to try to make this transition. Like what was said earlier, amid a historically underfunded environment and campus. So one has to do with the affordability of theological education. On average, Black students in theological education come out with $12,000 more in debt and enter into social sector fields and vocations where they're making on average about $10,000 less, right? So the vocational viability of students has a lot to do with the affordability of education. Then there's accessibility, which has a lot to do with the platforms that we make our curriculum available to students on, that also allows us to expand our enrollment beyond students who are able to make it onto campus. But what we're facing is a digital divide among our students in terms of access to hardware connectivity, and just broadband in the communities where our students reside, not to mention the access that we have in 30314. Right. And then historically, this underinvestment in the infrastructure of the institution, chief of which I would say is our technology backbone. That's what's most highlighted right now, because our students are operating primarily online. And so having an adequate technology backbone, hardware, software, infrastructure, networking, as well as IT personnel makes a huge difference. And that's where one of our major challenges is. And then deferred maintenance. Because, as was said earlier, our institutions are trying to keep the lights on, trying to make sure students are funded and make sure the operations continue. Most times we have not had a capital budget and an operational budget, right? We've been operating out of one pot, trying to fix roofs and educate students at the same time. And so that deferred maintenance becomes an albatross without a significant investment in the institution. And for us, ITC being a historically Black theological school, much of the investment that many of our counterpart institutions receive, the largesse that they receive from federal and state sources, we did not have access to, right? And so we've been making our way, increasing some philanthropic funding, but the kind of transformational investments that were made in the infrastructure as well as the student and emergency support, ITC did not have access to because we are a historically Black graduate school, and most of those funding formulas was based on undergraduate funding. So those are the challenges that we have as we are transforming this model and really trying to build another generation of prophetic problem solvers who meet the needs of our communities in Georgia and beyond. With that, I'll take some questions. I'm aware that one of the lies preachers tend to tell is I won't be before you long. And Senator Halpern gave me a time limit that I want to be respectful of. So
Thank you very much for that presentation. I heard you say that one of the biggest challenges is around digital access and broadband. And I know that we talk so much in this state about broadband and rural broadband. My district is also not where your school is, but on the west side of Atlanta. And I think the point I think that you've made is that our HBCU, certainly your school, but really all of them are literally located in distressed communities and typically disinvested communities that don't have the kind of infrastructure that we might assume that they have.
that's right. That's right. So when you saw that kind of vision of the campus redevelopment, that had to do with how do we reimagine our campuses to be those kind of spaces that address those critical needs and attract the kind of investment that we want to see in those areas in which we've been disinvested. So again, whether it's food security, technology, housing, all of those become opportunities for us to reimagine how our assets can play a role in bringing the kind of investment that we want to see in those communities where we sit.
Great, thank you. We have a number of questions. I'm going to turn to Senator Sims.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your presentation. The young gentleman on your presentation was the NAACP president.
He was.
He's a former president, I'm sorry. But his statement was, he was asked, why did you come to the theological seminary, the school?
Right.
And he said, to learn how to lead my people.
Yes.
Do you think if he had gone to a PWI seminary, that he would have gotten more or less based on who he is in order to become a good leader, a great leader, a quality leader? Give me your opinion. Because you knew him. I'm
Yes, I did.
assuming that you knew him.
Yes. So I'll speak for him and myself.
Okay.
The reason I chose ITC twice, both as a student and coming back as president, is mission alignment.
Okay.
Now, I served, prior to coming to ITC, I served at the fund, what used to be known as the Fund for Theological Education, FTE, now known as the Forum for Theological Exploration. One of my critical roles there was working with historically white theological schools around issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is in a time in this field where, like we talked about at Clayton State, there's an increasing number of predominantly white institutions who are reckoning with an emerging majority of Black and brown students in their ranks. And what we've seen, what I saw in that role across the field of theological education was that diversity, equity, and inclusion in those cases was about representation, faces and places. But what we tried to press folks on was, how do you create the conditions and the climates in which students and scholars of color can thrive? Which is a very different question than how do you just get faces and places to represent a kind of window dressing diversity. What we found, and much, sometimes in job descriptions, you have other duties as assigned. One of my other duties as assigned in that role was trauma nurse.
Trauma?
Now, here's what I mean. Many students and scholars who receive funding to go to predominantly white institutions and were attracted by that funding realized that they were attracted into institutions that claimed to be about diversity, but where they were experiencing violence at close range, right? So the question about whether they would be well prepared, I won't say they wouldn't be well educated, but for students like me, like James Woodall, who have a sense of mission and connection to lead my people, to bring about an alternative to the status quo. ITC has always been about that in its mission, in its ethos, in its culture, and in its climate. And these institutions do more than just educate in the classroom. They form you as people, right? And so I think I'm probably better suited and better situated now, having been formed in a climate where I didn't have to explain myself. I could take myself for granted, right? And I can take seriously the language and the knowledge and the wisdom of the people that I came from so that I could go back and serve them well. That's my long answer to your question.
Love it, love it. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Thanks for being here today.
Sure.
On your, I think it was your last slide or second to last slide, you talked about technology investment. I know that's one of the key cornerstones that I know Senator Halpern and this committee is going to try and solve. As we talk about technology investment, I think one of the things going to your comments that may be helpful for the committee, or at least for me, as we talk about that is, understanding what is the true technology investment for your institution to be successful, for all of the HBCUs, what is the level of capital investment that currently exists, and then what is the necessary level of capital investment that needs to happen in order to make sure that you're being set up for success, but also two, we're not placing institutions in a place where you're being either forced to or indirectly because of resources turning away students, which I'm sure is happening at some level. So I think for all of the HBCUs, I think that would be some interesting data for us to see as we actually try and solve this problem, to really figure out, how do we get more individuals and students and kids in the classroom, set them up for success, but also two, I think, start developing how as a state do we create a pathway to solve these problems. As I've told Senator Halpern, just being able to serve on this committee it's really cool. But at the end of the day, I would also like to see some recommendations or something around this that every senator here can take back to, our peers and colleagues and have a hard conversation about, how do we come up with the resources to do some of this? I know we're not going to conquer the world tomorrow, but how do we do this in a phased-in approach or something as we look to solve these problems? Because all of this cascades into, what does the future really hold?
Right.
So I think that data would be very critical. So, and thank you for being here again
Sure.
today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are no other questions. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
I just
There are
want,
more questions. Okay,
well,
hold on.
not really a
Senator
question,
C.
but a statement. Basically, because I do represent Clayton State University and the term window dressing, that's not what we do at Clayton State.
Sure.
I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say to you, Mr. President, thank you for your vision for ITC.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
If we have, we're good. Okay. So next coming to the podium, Mr. Rodriguez Murray. He's the Senior Vice President, Public Policy at the United Negro College Fund.
First of all, good afternoon to everyone. Madam Chair, members of this committee, I'm delighted to be here, not because two presidents that we represent are here, both the president of ITC and Clark Atlanta University. I'm delighted to be here, not because I spent my formative years on Payne College's campus as an Upward Bound student. I'm delighted to be here, not just because I'm a graduate of Morehouse College in the heart of Atlanta, Georgia. I'm delighted to be here because I'm a native Georgian, born and raised in the part of this state that is not Atlanta, Augusta, which is only world-renowned 1 week a year. However, I have a distinct level of pride because the state Senate that represents and governs the state where I was born, raised, and dreamed are discussing the institutions that have made my reality possible. And so I want to commend you for gathering today. And if you would have had this hearing in Antarctica, I would have been here. I'm going to apologize to Mr. Rogers on your staff, Madam Chair. I'm going to have him move around this presentation a little bit so that we can stay in the timeline. I do want to say a little bit about what the United Negro College Fund is. What is UNCF? We're going to talk a little bit about historically Black colleges and universities. What are HBCUs? And why in the world are we having this one particular hearing based on these institutions? Why are they that important? So UNCF is this 78-year-old African-American legacy organization. When you think of Black legacy organizations, you think NAACP, UNCF. We're 78 years old. We're this essential acronym in the American lexicon that is synonymous with not only African-American or Black excellence, but also historically Black colleges and universities. UNCF does two things really well. Number one, we seek to represent private historically Black colleges and universities. Those are names you know, like Morehouse, like Spelman, like Clark Atlanta University, like ITC. And they are names that you don't know because not as many people know Payne College. But we represent them. And because we have such an outsized brand in this space, we also take seriously to represent the concerns of all HBCUs, including public institutions, because no matter where you know it from, everyone knows our call and our motto. A mind is a terrible thing to waste. And members of the committee, if you use it without contacting our lawyers, they'll be in touch. So we take seriously the representation of HBCUs and we raise funds for them. We're the only membership organization you know where we pay the members. The members don't pay us for being a part of us. In addition to that, we're a significant scholarship organization. And to the senator from Dallas, Georgia, we're going to talk a little bit about pricing. And we are a significant scholarship organization. We award $100 million to students. We award $100 million to 10,000 students in 1,100 different colleges and universities. So that's more than the 37 members of UNCF. That is more than the 100 plus HBCUs. That's likely people you know at every college and university, somebody there has had or currently has a UNCF scholarship. And so that makes us not only represent HBCUs, but wherever there are Black students, wherever there are underserved students, wherever there are economically disadvantaged students, we take seriously representing their concerns. So all of that is factored into what I'm going to share with you today. Right before we move into the rest of the presentation, I do want to say a little bit, because we've had previous presentations that delved into these matters on the surface level, why HBCUs are different from other institutions, why we're discussing them today. You should think a lot about HBCUs being likened unto the story of and the conditions of African Americans in this country. HBCUs have a harder time accessing capital. We talk a lot about why HBCUs are not doing certain things. You have to put in context. You don't take a snapshot or a Polaroid in 2022. When you look at HBCUs, you look at the story of African Americans ever since the first ship came to the country. You look at the struggle to be able to learn. You see it in the context of our entire timeline, and you realize that they've been underinvested in since inception. And so they have a harder time getting access to capital. And when they do get access to capital, oftentimes it's at worse rates, because the dirty little secret is that the banks think that HBCUs, like they think oftentimes African Americans, are risky investments. So they have to pay higher interest rates to do what it takes just to operate their business like every other college and university. So in essence, they're punished for doing what they have to do. Resources need to come in more. We'll talk about that, and a bit about pricing. 70+% of HBCU students are Pell Grant eligible. Pell Grant eligible is federal government speak for coming from a lower socioeconomic status. I was that Pell Grant eligible student from Morehouse College. When I made that 2.5-hour drive, and my stepfather, sometimes it was 2 hours. I'm glad he didn't get a speeding ticket. When he made that drive from Augusta to Atlanta every single time, I came to Atlanta all 4 years with the Pell Grant and the Hope Scholarship and institutional money from Morehouse and a $10,000 a year scholarship from UNCF. And all of that put together with a little elbow grease, a typewriter in the year 2000. And a checked out book from the Augusta Public Library made it so I could be debt free from college before I was age 30. But I'm the exception. I'm not the rule. And so how do you make that story more real without Tinkerbell coming along once in our lifetime, waving a magic wand and making debt go away? Not to liken the president to a Disney character. I will have us move to slide number 15, Mr. Rogers. Again, I apologize. I'm going to have you move, but I've tried to pull the specific numbers. So UNCF, we've mentioned that we represent the colleges and universities. For my friend, Dr. French, the president of Clark Atlanta University, we're going to start with advocacy, because UNCF has been instrumental representing these institutions to get very specific outcomes. So for our friends that are public policy and decision makers, we don't task you with automatically knowing what we want. We have to tell you what we want, and then you have to see if you and your colleagues have the political will to pull through. And so what we did on the federal level, in the CARES Act and in all of the major stimulus bills that provided for the coronavirus pandemic, was get HBCUs across the country $6.5 billion of grants, not loans, in the last 2+ years. Included in that number is forgiveness for 45 schools for loans that they had to the federal government, to the tune of $1.7 billion. And getting that forgiveness and getting those grants, not loans, for the institutions has allowed an institution like Clark Atlanta University or Morehouse College to reimagine themselves without tens of millions of dollars sitting on their books for which the students, through their tuition and fees, had to make payments. And so not only are we allowing the institutions to emerge from this worldwide pandemic, which is still ongoing, but emerge whenever it is over, we're allowing them to emerge not the same way they went in, but we're allowing them to emerge stronger. And then, oh, by the way, these institutions are so unique and so focused on the needs of their students. Every kind of college and university and every single one in this state got coronavirus pandemic relief money. These are the only institutions that chose to use the money to relieve the student debt balances of their students when other colleges and universities had more money than these institutions. These institutions were so focused on their students that they wanted to make their students better. That shows you that there's a heart and soul of these institutions that is not everywhere else. They may lack in resources, but the care for the students and the ability to impact the underserved is something that you cannot measure. Let's go to slide 37. I'm going to look at a few statistics. As you all can see, I'm sparing you a lot. Despite barriers to success, the outsized impact of Black colleges and universities is clear and astounding, calling into question the efforts of better resourced counterparts. Why do you say that? 80% of all Black judges, HBCU grads. 80% of all Black doctors and dentists, HBCU grads. 1/2 of all Black lawyers, HBCU grads. Half of all Black professors, HBCU grads. 50% of all Black public school teachers, HBCU grads. 40% of the Black members of Congress, including your predecessor, Madam Chair, HBCU grads. 40% all Black engineers. Why do those stats matter? Because these institutions are only 3% of the higher education landscape. Only 3%. And they have this kind of outsized impact by enrolling only 10% of Blacks that are in higher education. There's something exceptional happening on these campuses that's not happening elsewhere that allows those students to succeed in ways that those who are going to more well-resourced institutions are not succeeding. They're raised oftentimes in the same family, in the same neighborhood, on the same street. Yet the students choosing to go to the institution with fewer resources have the better outcome. Slide 38, please. 51% HBCU graduates, 51%, they are more likely than their Black peers to move into a higher income quartile. 56%, they earn 56% more than they would without their college credentials. This is a time period where a lot of people are calling higher education into question. An HBCU credential allows you to earn 50% more over the lifetime of a graduate, and we will get into the economic impact. We appreciate our peers that pulled our data earlier, but we're going to get into that in a moment because a Black student with an HBCU credential earns $1 million more over their lifetime than if they did not have that credential. These are facts. Next slide, 39. And speaking of the economic impact, when you put all the schools together, there's a nearly $15 billion total economic impact. And the schools, when you put them together, hire and fire like a Fortune 50 company. I didn't say 500. I said a Fortune 50 company when you put them all together. This is the sum total impact. We'll get into the Georgia specific institutions one by one soon. Let's go to slide 53. This shows you where the schools are located. There was some discussion about the neighbors and what the neighboring states are doing. This is where HBCUs are across the country. HBCUs and some that are closely aligned with HBCUs. And you see a big dot there in Atlanta. And you see more dots across the state. I will call your attention to the one right there on the Georgia-South Carolina border. That's Payne College. But you'll see Georgia has a lot of HBCUs, and that's the reason why we're having this discussion today. Slide 59. We're going to look at the timeline of when these schools came into existence. You look at the timeline where Black people were in America from the 1600s, moving up through current time. You have to wait until you get to 1837 for the first Black institution, and that was not in the South. You have to look post-Civil War and move your way right into the time period of the Freedmen's Bureau, et cetera, to establish these institutions here in Georgia and all across the country. There were many more HBCUs than the 100 plus that persist today. These are the survivors that you have. And so you see what we've been able to accomplish over a number of years. But this gives you a timeline of what higher education has looked like in the story of Black people. And it got really busy after the Civil War for us in terms of our ascension into higher education. But look how long it was desolate. This is the catch up, because sometimes HBCUs are compared with peers that were allowed to be established without the threat of violence or harm for centuries before we were. When you compare HBCUs, our preference is to compare apples with apples and oranges with oranges. If I'm going to compare HBCUs, I want Clark Atlanta up against North Carolina A&T. I think that's a fair fight. I want Morehouse against Spelman. It's almost a fair fight because Spelman's going to win. But I don't want a Harvard versus Payne conversation, because that is void of historical and systemic items which are real and persistent and dictate the outcome. Let's go to number 66. I'm going to quote Dr. French now. He speaks about HBCUs and what we've been able to do. We have worked hard because the number one item that separates these institutions from others is it's not the skin color of the students, it's resources. Let's be real. These institutions, like others, have capable students with aptitude like you would not believe. The faculty is talented like you wouldn't believe, but they have to work harder because there are fewer resources, and they have to do more than other faculty would if they had more resources. The only distinguishing factor are the resources. If I were if I were going to be crass, I would say, show me the money. But this is too dignified a body for me to do that today. But I have to say to the committee that the resources are the difference. And then there is, when we discuss resources, the temptation to want to look only at the public institutions. I caution this committee, when you look at the impact of HBCUs, the students that are choosing those institutions are not viewing publics versus privates. They're looking at what best suits their needs. So I caution you well in advance. Don't pit the publics versus the privates. Look at the impact overall and how you can support overall. Let's go to slide 68, and then we're going to stay a few in a row, Mr. Rogers. I know you'll be happy for that. 68's the who. What's at stake? Black excellence. So if you think, why are we having this discussion today? You know all of these names, and these careers wouldn't be possible were not for their HBCU education. Next slide. If not for HBCUs, separate but equal would still be the law of the land. Next slide. If not for HBCUs, the civil rights movement, which is so important to the history of this state, wouldn't have gone far. Next slide. If not for HBCUs, one small step could have been too big a leap. That Apollo 11 mission. Next slide. If not for HBCUs, Head Start would have been a non-starter. Next slide, please. If not for HBCUs, Juneteenth would just be another day. Next slide, please. If not for HBCUs, American history would be very different. Next slide, please. If not for HBCUs, there would be no rising Black middle class. What number slide are we on, Mr. Rogers?
75.
2 more. Next slide, please. If not for HBCUs, Black arts wouldn't be a global phenomenon as we wait on the release of Black Panther 2. Next slide, please. And my CEO, the person to whom I answer, Dr. Michael Lomax, who is a resident here of Georgia, says HBCUs consistently produce community, national, and world leaders whose impact touch us all. HBCUs consistently showcase higher education excellence, modeling equity and social justice for us all. And now I'm going to ask you to go to the separate link and let's look specifically at the economic impact of HBCUs in Georgia. Let's look in Georgia. Continue to go down. You'll see all the institutions there at the bottom. Now, collectively, stay right there in that blue frame for us, Mr. Rogers. Go up just a little bit. Scroll up just a little bit.
Oh, that's blue.
Yes. Georgia's 9 HBCUs produce, and it's going to be bigger soon from my friends from Morris Brown. Georgia's 9 HBCUs, when this report was done, was $1.3 billion of economic impact annually with a B. 12,000 plus jobs. And one graduating class, one class every May, when you see graduation stories, think of this, one class collectively, their lifetime earnings are $9.1 billion. That seems like an abstract stat, except a lot of times when Black students come to Georgia to attend an HBCU, they never leave. So that means these lifetime earnings are staying in Georgia. For those that would question whatever this committee does and say, how do we pay for it? The Black college grads are going to pay for it with their lifetime earnings. Let's scroll down, Mr. Rogers, and let's pick a few of these institutions. Let's click in Albany State. Let's click the first one, non-UNCF member, but great HBCU. This institution supports nearly 1,500 jobs in Albany. In Albany, not Atlanta, Albany, nearly 1,500 jobs. They have an economic impact in Albany of over $140 million a year. And one graduating class, one class of their students' lifetime earnings will be $1.6 billion. 1.6 billion. Let's go back. Let's pull another institution. Let's try Clark Atlanta. Not because their president just walked in serendipitously. Clark Atlanta, at a minimum, supports 1,700 jobs in this city where we sit and stand today. Clark Atlanta has at minimum, and this is conservative as the Dickens, a $204 million economic impact here in hot Atlanta. Clark Atlanta's one graduating class, just one class, has lifetime earnings of $1.9 billion with a B dollars. Just for the sake of conversation, let's just go to Morehouse, only because I know a couple of alum. Morehouse, a neighbor of Clark Atlanta, supports about 1,600 jobs. That little bitty place, 1,600 jobs, $188 million minimum economic impact a year, nearly $1 billion of lifetime earnings for one graduating class. And if you let the graduates of Morehouse tell it, this many times that. I say all this to say to the distinguished study committee on excellence, innovation, and technology at historically Black colleges and universities. Investments are needed. These institutions differ from every other type of institution in this state. They've made an indelible impression upon this state. They make this state hum. They create the Black middle class in this state. The economic impact that they have is second to none. And this is all with minimal resources. Imagine what this classification of institutions would be if you invested in them like the flagship. And I'd be remiss to say this if I didn't say this. In terms of the bomb threats that have gone on for these institutions, a subject which is rather sore for me and all of those that we represent. There are funds that come from the federal government through Justice and Homeland Security, and they come to the state of Georgia and they pass through the state. And oftentimes those funds go to, for these bomb threats and other safety reasons, those funds go to the flagship institutions. It's obvious to me and to the news and print media that these institutions are the ones in danger. And so my call to the legislators is to work hard in the upcoming sessions to get the funds where they belong, to apply the balm to the misery, and to make sure that these campuses are hardened, they are protected, and they are supported, because until those that threaten these campuses are brought to justice, we have to do our part to protect the jobs, the impact, and the lifetime earnings that these institutions are producing every single day against the grain. And I want to thank the committee, the study committee, for allowing me to be here today.
Thank you. You've got several questions, and I've got some comments too, but I'll leave mine for the end. Senator Anderson, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One, if you don't mind, before we move on to our next speaker, to have our current HBCUs that are present in the room to introduce themselves. Sir. My spirit is leaping. And I have to say thank you for your work and efforts put into this. I want to say everything, including hallelujah and thank you, Jesus. One, because this was about education. And that's what it takes to get an understanding. And it was presented in a way that anyone who wanted to hear could hear. Secondly, we know why HBCUs were established, because we had to create our own space in order to have higher learning. Black students who choose to go to HBCUs do so, as you said, because it serves a purpose for them. Most white students don't have to work as hard at a PWI. So the space for Black students created at HBCU comes with creating a foundation that helps it become easy to learn in an environment of family. So the foundation is there, family is there, and we do like to have a little fun, because we understand that this is a safe space for us to project, to propel, and to prosper when we leave that space. You made a comment about scholarships, membership. How do you go about winning over institutions that have not joined? Because I cannot see why an institution would not be a member.
So we don't have a problem with institutions wanting to join. We have to make sure everyone meets the qualifications, and then the joining at UNCF is left up to the members. The members decide who becomes members of UNCF. There have been institutions that have been members in the past, did not qualify
Okay.
and are repetitioning. And that is something that I know the members are taking very seriously. But I carry out the whims and wishes of the members. I don't make those decisions, but organizationally, I'll tell you what, if the president of an institution that was not a member of UNCF called me on the phone, I would take him and her just as seriously as I take Reverend Dr. Williams and I take Dr. George French.
Thank you. And thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Anna Vitarte.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Murray, thanks for being here. And as a fellow Pell Grant recipient, I get it. One question I did have, I don't know if you can answer, and if not, maybe this is a question we need to research and have the committee follow up on is, do you know, in terms of Hope dollars, how much do students receive at HBCUs, both public and private across the state?
We can pull that.
Okay.
Hope dollars received. What's the time frame you want us to look at?
Whatever the chairwoman says.
I'll come back to you on that. The Student Finance Commission, those are conversations that we've started to have as well. So they may very well be able to get us that too, more quickly even. I wanted to say, and I didn't say this in my introduction, I'm not an HBCU graduate myself. Both of my parents are. And they both grew up in Mississippi on farms and both found their way to HBCU, Tougaloo College, now in Jackson, Mississippi, was at Tougaloo, Mississippi. And that completely changed the trajectory of their lives. So I'm a huge ally for HBCUs because I know that the life that I have and that my sister has is directly related to the fact that my parents were able to have an HBCU education that moved them to places that they never dreamed of being able to go. So thank you for sharing the economic impact of the schools. And to me, one of the real takeaways from your presentation also really is about the part where our HBCUs are creating a middle class. They are taking students who otherwise would not have opportunity to do as well in their careers and allowing them to really reach their own promise. A question that I have for you, two things. One, UNCF, and you named a lot of the private colleges when you were first talking. Will you just talk to us a little bit and explain just the distinction between you and Thurgood Marshall College Fund, which you also had on your sheet when you were doing the timeline, just so that we can understand that.
So UNCF started in 1944 as a campaign by the then president of Tuskegee University, noting that private HBCUs could raise more money working collectively as a fund than they could individually. It's a little known fact that many HBCUs until the 1900s, well into the 1900s, actually had white presidents because it was thought that if they allowed a Black person to lead the institution, no one would give philanthropically to the institution. And so some institutions until just about the 1960s. And so UNCF came together and they said, we're going to collectively fundraise. And so that's what we do today. We raise money for the colleges and universities. And twice a year, Dr. French, we make disbursements of resources to the institutions based off of a formula. In addition to that, I mentioned that we're the second largest private provider of scholarships in the country, period. $100 million leaves from us to Black students across the country. And we're the largest private provider of scholarships in the country, period, to minorities. Thurgood Marshall College Fund, they represent the public HBCUs. And so their model is a little bit different. They don't necessarily make disbursements of resources to institutions like we do. and their scholarship portfolio is a fraction of ours. However, they have a larger focus on making sure that students are prepared for workforce rigors in a very specific professional way. And so they have a very focused niche that they make sure their students are prepared for, and they were able to get permission from the late Supreme Court Justice, and he allowed them to use his name, and there really is no better name in our history.
Thank you. I do have another question, Senator Smith.
Thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed your presentation. As you look at the funding formula for the Hope Scholarships and the Zale Miller Scholarships, please take a look at how the difference between the scholarship prior to the last bill that we passed and how it is being funded now or doled out to colleges and universities, so we can see where the majority of the funds and the funding sources is taking place.
We'll look deeply into that and
Okay.
be back in touch.
Because I think we'd all be a little surprised about that.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your being here today and sharing so much. And we'll distribute the presentation to everybody as well.
And I will also follow up with
Yes.
full written remarks in hopes that whenever I can't be here, the words will be.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We are. Thank you. I'm going to take Chairwoman's privilege a little bit and change the order of the agenda just a bit, because I think Mr. Tutterow needs to leave. So if you're okay, I'm going to let him come up to the podium now. But while he's doing that, can we take a moment and just let our college presidents or designees who are here just stand up for a moment and introduce yourselves really quickly and briefly. For those who are speaking, we'll really get more of you later, but we'll start with Dr. French.
Yes, thank you, Senator. George C. French, Jr., President of Rocky Mountain University, with colleagues from Division of Education and Government. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Kevin James, President of Forest Farm.
Yes. And
Good afternoon again, Madam President, President.
thank you.
Good afternoon, Kimberly, Ballard, Washington, President of Savannah State University.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Timothy Stewart, Kane College, here on behalf of Dr. Charlotte Hbcus.
Thank you very much. Okay, you've got the floor. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Halpern, fellow committee members, including my friend, the President Pro Tem, and distinguished guests here today. It's been an inspiring discussion to be part of. I am Roger Tutterow. I'm Professor of Economics at Kennesaw State University, and where I also hold the Hensler Financial Endowed Chair. In addition, it's been my privilege to travel the state over the past 3 decades and speaking to business and civic groups and observe how the economic and business climate varies around our state and identifying opportunities for others to enjoy the prosperity that we have in some corners. Today, I appear at the invitation of Chairwoman Halpern to provide testimony on the Georgia economy and how or if the state should be thinking about its 10 HBCUs in that framework. I accept the invitation with the caveat that while I am comfortable on speaking about the economy, I offer the disclaimer that I am not an expert on all issues in higher education, and nor am I a specific expert on HBCUs, although I've been blessed to have so many fine HBCU alumni in our graduate programs over the years. Moreover, my comments are my opinion and do not necessarily represent that of the university system or any entity from which I am affiliated, but I appreciate the chance to share with you. Any reflections on the economic climate, I think in Georgia or nationwide, should come with the important caveat that the economic landscape of the last 3 years has been atypical of American economic experience in the post-World War II era. After expanding for 128 consecutive months from July of 2009 till February of 2020, the national economy entered into a deep recession due to COVID-19 and the public health crisis that ensued. By all measures, the recession of 2020 was the steepest and deepest in the post-World War II experience. Non-farm payrolls fell nationwide by 14.4%, and the economy's output, as measured by GDP, dropped by 31% annualized rate in the second quarter of 2020 alone. However, while this is the steepest recession in modern times, it has also been the shortest. By May of 2021, the economy began to recover, with GDP surpassing pre-recession levels by the spring of 2021. However, non-farm payrolls did not exceed pre-recession levels until June of 2020, essentially 2 months ago. Today, analysts wrestle with whether we are on the verge of another recession or will be so in the next several quarters. With regard to the local economy, it is clear that Georgia has outperformed the nation and that of many of the surrounding states during the recent period, before, during, and after the pandemic. During the worst of the pandemic recession, the second quarter of 2020, national GDP fell 31.8%, while Georgia dropped by a more moderate 27.7%, putting it among the best performing quintile of states in our country. With regard to non-farm payrolls, Georgia exceeded pre-pandemic employment levels in December 2021, 7 months prior to the national economy reaching that hurdle. Indeed, employment in Georgia is now 3.1% higher than where it was before the pandemic began in 2020, placing it 7th among the 50 states plus the district in terms of where we are versus the pre-pandemic. Over a longer horizon, Georgia has outpaced the nation in growth, employment, and output. Over the last 10 years, employment has increased 21.8% in Georgia, placing it 8th among the employment gains in all states and districts. It is also worth noting that in the Southeast, only Florida and Texas have shown employment growth faster than Georgia over the past decade. Finally, if we look around the state, 9 out of our 14 MSAs now report higher employment than before the pandemic, and it is likely that 11 of our 14 will do so by the end of the day. Finally, it is also worth noting that Georgia's fiscal health remains strong. We remain among a handful of states that receive AAA ratings from the bond rating agencies. In my opinion, this reflects a long history of fiscal responsibility with regard to expenditures and a tax regime that provides diversified sources of revenue. While it may be instructive to consider Georgia's performance in absolute terms or relative to other states, I would like to acknowledge the important role that workforce preparation plays in our long-term economic prosperity. Dating back 25 years, the leadership of Georgia had recognized the important role that educational institutions play in the state's economic development. The ICAP program, which stands for Georgia's Intellectual Partnership Program, that was initiated by the university system in the mid-1990s, partnered institutions with corporate entities to customize educational programs to fit the needs of their employers. It is worth note that these partnerships revolved around having distinctive characteristics of the skills that were required, particularly those that are technologically favored, what we now in more modern parlance call products of STEM programs. The partnerships included TSYS, Total Systems in Columbus, Lockheed Martin, NCR, Equifax, Aflac, all major leaders in the Georgia economy. The ICAP program also emphasized the need for candid assessment of Georgia's performance in developing workforce for the next generation. I was honored to partner with then Vice Chancellor Annie Hunt Burris to conduct surveys and focus groups to identify perceptions of higher education and its role in workforce development. One of the consistent findings of our work was that one of the most important factors for corporations deciding where to locate and where to expand would be access to an available, well-trained workforce. The important role of educational institutions in economic prosperity is clear. Among American success stories of the past 50 years is the rise of Silicon Valley, the Research Triangle, the Technology Corridor in Austin, and the 128 Corridor in Boston. All four of these hubs have been hubs for innovation and growth and are clearly grounded in relationships between academic institutions and their recent graduates. Which brings us to an important comment regarding HBCUs. In 2021, the McKinsey & Company consulting firm issued a report on how HBCUs can accelerate Black economic mobility. In this report, they reported that HBCUs represent just 3% of all higher education institutions in the United States, but 10% of all Black students matriculated through these HBCUs. Thus, their role in the development of an educated minority workforce is clear. A related question would be to identify the proportion of Black executives, professionals, and entrepreneurs that moved through HBCUs. And this is a form of the question that the distinguished senator from Albany posed, and I think was well answered with my friend from the UNCF. From an economic perspective, the McKinsey report asserts that strong HBCU network would increase Black worker incomes by over $10 million in addition to strengthening, $10 billion, in addition to strengthening the economy with $1.2 billion in incremental business profits, $300 billion in decreased student loan debt, and $1 billion in additional consumer expenditures. While I have not independently verified their analysis, this report, which I will share with the committee, should be considered a good starting point for further discussions about the economic impact of HBCUs on the Georgia economy. Finally, I would suggest that to the degree that HBCUs contribute to diversity in the local workforce, they may be providing us another component of contribution. Without debating public or private policy, it is clear that in recent years, many corporations have adopted diversity goals with regard to workforce and management as part of their longer-term strategic trajectories. In pursuit of that goal, it may be that some corporations find migrating to markets with a well-trained, diversified workforce is more attractive than simply recruiting workers into markets in which they currently are. One need only scan the skyline of Midtown Atlanta to see the names of technology companies that have come to our city and state in recent years. And I would submit that access to a well-trained, diversified labor force is one of the contributing factors to those decisions. I appreciate the opportunity to share my comments with the committee today. I commend the Senate for their inquiry into this important area, and I welcome any questions that the senators may have.
Very much. Any questions or comments from the committee? Senator Anna Vitarte.
Thank you, Ms. It's always the fresh air to hear you talk. I've heard you 1,000 times. Never gets old. I have more of a comment. This isn't really a question for you, but just knowing that somebody from Payne is here in the room. I know in the space and in our study committee, we're about to launch in the next couple of weeks around cybersecurity. There is not enough cybersecurity, in terms of workforce and securing the state. And I know that's a big conversation in Augusta from talking to Senator Jones, as we talk about how do we, embed and in a sense, integrate our HBCUs into the bigger workforce piece in terms of technology, security in these pieces when we know all of our universities and colleges cannot do this alone. I'm a graduate of Georgia Tech, and I think we're the preeminent school in America for cybersecurity, but I also know Georgia Tech cannot do it alone. And so I look forward to having that conversation, I think, in the next month or two when we visit Augusta to talk about, how do we kind of, to your point, look at these different sectors and industries and link them to different HBCUs across the state. And then also to ask the question about, where do the connections need to be made? What is the investment level? But also how does that grow our economy? And in the sense of cybersecurity, how does it make us safer?
Right. And again, thank you, Senator, for reminding us of the important role that cybersecurity plays, particularly in Augusta, but certainly throughout the state of Georgia. We also think about fintech as being an area where we have a concentration of new activity. And I think in both of those cases, it really makes the case for us having more STEM-oriented education in high school and in college. And while I'm an unapologetic advocate of rigorous, broad liberal arts training in the early part of your education, I am equally much an advocate that we train our workforce that are in college with STEM-oriented tools that increase their value in the labor force. The days in which a small part of the population went to college are long behind us, and so now we celebrate having a larger population of our people going to college, but we got to make sure we bring them out with a skill set that they're well compensated. And I think these are two areas where Georgia has a clear comparative advantage.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate you being here. Thank you. And
Thank you,
I
Senator.
will be back in touch with you. Thank you. Okay, moving along, we are going to hear next from President Kimberly Ballard Washington from Savannah State University. We both got the orange memo.
Thank you all for wearing that orange. I appreciate it. Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to apologize for my tardiness. We had an event this morning in Savannah and left after we completed that. But thank you for allowing us to be here and be with you. Listening to Mr. Murray, sorry, I know the first name. Mr. Murray, he did an excellent job in talking about what happens for and with HBCUs. He gave you the numbers. I want to share a little bit more, but definitely don't want to duplicate what he said and some of the statistics. I am Kimberly Ballard Washington. I am the 14th president of Savannah State University. I stand before you representing our alumni, our students, several of whom are with us. Our alumni are with us, and actually, we have alumni and students because we have a faculty member who's here from our College of Science and Technology. She's an alum. We have a state representative who's with us. She's an alum. And we also have our executive director for governmental relations and economic development. She's an alum. Importantly, we have our Student Government Association members. They will be alums very soon and contributing to the economic impact of Savannah State University. Very glad to have all of them here. And this is why we are here to talk to you about the importance of making sure that HBCUs are properly considered in everything that the state does. Our students, our alumni, represent future teachers, counselors, educators, public servants, law enforcement, scientists, nurses, doctors, engineers, lawyers, actors, actresses, entrepreneurs, and yes, cybersecurity professionals, because we have one of the top cybersecurity programs in the country at Savannah State University, recently featured by USA Today. So we are here to help Georgia Tech with that process. The higher education landscape continues to evolve, and although at the core of all HBCU missions is the pursuit of inalienable rights, HBCUs are positioned on the equity side of that conversation. No one, absolutely no one, can honestly question the purpose, passion, and potential that our students have. We've become challenged by our inability to commit resources timely in fundamental areas that impact our success. But despite that, we and our students in particular continue to excel. It is necessary for us to take inventory singularly and collectively For many institutions, the infrastructure capacity is not at the desired level. This study, I believe, will serve as a platform from which we thrive. We will continue to thrive, whether it's the analysis to determine gaps or pain points, setting goals, prioritizing initiatives, and developing business cases for the implementation of high-impact initiatives. I must underscore my remarks by acknowledging HBCUs represent a piece of a larger puzzle that relies heavily on advocacy at all levels, local, state, and federal, and the understanding and appreciation for the economic impact we will have and continue to have. I look forward to the results of this study and the next steps towards a sustainable future in a number of areas. The collaborations that we may have as HBCUs in centers for contracting, cloud computing, research, healthcare, agriculture, and energy, workforce and small business development partnerships, private and in municipalities. The speaker from Kennesaw State mentioned the McKinsey study. He indicated to you that 3% of all higher educational institutions that's who we are. HBCUs represent only 3%, but are educating 10% of the Black students matriculating in colleges. What he didn't mention is that 17% of all bachelor's degrees and 24% of all STEM-related bachelor's degrees earned by Black students in the United States were conveyed by HBCUs. We are definitely hitting above our weight class, and we will continue to do so with your help. Madam, I would not continue going into the numbers, but would say that I'm available, and so is my team here, to answer questions that we may be able to field.
Thank you very much. Would you share with us some of if you had to lay out top maybe 2 challenges that you face today, what would those be?
Funding. I don't know how not to say that phrase, but of course, our funding is tied to enrollment. Our enrollment, like many institutions, has seen a decline over recent years. There are fewer students, but we also having the availability to be able to be nimble would be very helpful, being able to respond to various crises as they come up. COVID taught us a lot. It hits everyone, and you have to be able to respond to those things. Crises will continue, but we need to be able to have be able to have things that we need in order to move forward without too much harm to our citizenry, our students.
And I've got one more. When we were talking just before about HBCUs really being a pathway to the middle class for Black students, I would love to know what percentage of students at Savannah State are first-generation college students.
So I don't have
Or
that.
it doesn't have to be the percentage,
Okay.
but how are you serving many first-generation college students even today? I think a lot of times we think it's 2022, but what does that look like at your school?
So we are still serving a lot of first-generation college students, and we'll continue to do so for the foreseeable future. We do have a lot of second, third, fourth-generation college students in our midst as well. One of the things I hope that we will be able to work through is to eliminating that term, first-generation college students, because as you stated, we are well into the time that we were able to become educated, and we need to move more of our people through the educated corridors. And so we want to, at Savannah State University, like our other HBCU sisters and brothers, to move from first generation, not because we don't want to educate those individuals, but we want there to be less individuals who are first generation.
Got it. Thank you very much. Okay, I've got a couple of questions. Senator Sims.
Thank you so very much. It's good to see you.
You as well.
I really appreciate you coming, and I appreciate your friendship and what you are doing to move Savannah State University forward. So thank you so very much. I don't have a question as much as I have a statement. The statement is HBCUs, especially the public ones, depend upon regents to get permission for programming. Now, we know we're not going to have another engineering school in the state of Georgia because of Georgia Tech. We're just not going to do that. That's not going to happen. But if a school decides, especially an HBCU school decides that they would like to have nursing or something else that will help build the healthcare personnel disparities, and they go to Regions, and Regions says, well, oh, you know, HBCus is building one down in Southwest Georgia, or we have this other one over in Moultrie, and we don't think you need to duplicate services. What do you think happens to that HBCU when a student comes from my county, Clay County, Quitman County, and says, I want to major in nursing. I want to go to Fort Valley, or I want to go to Savannah State, or I want to go to Albany State University. And we tell them that there is no nursing program there. But you can go to Kennesaw, or you can go to Georgia State, or what happens? We are totally left out of the equation, and we have asked for years and years for better programming. That's a huge concern in this state. We don't want duplicating services, but then somewhere along the line, somebody will duplicate. It'll happen, but it just won't happen with us. So that's a big issue, Madam Chairman, and we want to address that as well, because also on Regents, how many Blacks do you have representing us, those of us that are from Black communities? How many do we have on Regents? Who's at the table to help us through that tragedy? Because those students want to go to Savannah State, Albany State, or Fort Valley, and they want to do nursing, but they cannot go because there are no programs there, and probably won't be for a very long time. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it, but we need to put that down. Thank you.
I have a comment and a question, but I'm gonna ask my question first. And thank you for being here. What efforts has your institution taken on to address housing and energy in the community and on the college campus or around the college campus?
Housing, energy, and what was the third?
Just housing and energy.
So housing, thankfully, we have a university foundation that works with us, and they take on a large burden of our housing resources. We can house, I believe the number is 2,400 students on our campus, thanks to the role that the university foundation plays with us. Energy efficiency is something that we're definitely concentrating on in trying to make sure that we are able to limit the resources of the state in paying for energy and conserving. And so we are working with one of our sister institutions that has a person who actually helps with those resources, helps us look at how we're handling the resources and working through those issues, and hope to have good news, because that will save us a large amount if we can handle the energy efficiencies very well.
Cool. Well, I appreciate that. And then I just want to follow up to what Senator Sims said. I think in light of, I think she's raising a very valid concern. I think one of the recommendations as we look to the future and we write this report and continue to have conversation over the weeks and months to come is, whether we should ask the Board of Regents to have an executive level cabinet person that basically is working with the HBCUs to ensure that the HBCUs interests and programming, and as we talk about, either expansion or contraction of the university system, is noted and discussed and has a seat at the table as we talk about the broader workforce and education and higher education discussions in this state. So to be blunt, and as you get to know me, I'm very straightforward. But I think to really, what is the solution in the pathway so that 12 months from now, we're not coming back and having this exact same conversation year after year. And we're really trying to solve this problem. I know in my community, I represent a very diverse community. It's suburban, urban, rural. When I was on the Paulding County School Board, we approved through our East Bloss, I believe it was a $6 or $7 million complete total renovation of Hiram High School in Paulding County, Georgia. And now it has what do you want to call it? Basically a pathway for computer science and STEM at that high school, because we recognize in many facets, and I know we do at Georgia Tech, speaking as an alum, just the continuing erosion of African Americans and Latinos and minorities in terms of being able to study STEM, but also turning that into what is that investment into the workforce or into their family, and creating those opportunities and bridging those opportunities at a middle school and high school level to where hopefully they're going to, come to your institution and apply and be accepted and live out their dreams. And so I think as we talk about the entire education system, I think we have to factor all of these different dynamics into it as an entire state if we're going to really have an impact. I think, the one-off programs are great, we always talk about, but I think until we really, come up with some really dynamic solutions and how we bridge and build these bridges. I can't talk. I think we're going to come back and have the same conversations and still be talking about the same solutions in the next 12 months to 10 years if we don't do something, I think, bold and significant. So I would ask that we, as Madam Chair, as you work with the committee in pulling together recommendations, that maybe that's something that we have a conversation at some point with the Chancellor about.
May I? Yes. So prior to going to Savannah State, I worked at the university system office. I worked with all the universities within the system. Duplication of efforts is a real thing that the current board, or at least the board when I was there, and the staff worked to make sure that you're using the state's resources well. I am proud to say that now at Albany State, you can get nursing. At Fort Valley State, most recently, you can get nursing. We still don't have it at Savannah State, but the programs, there are ways to get the programs. One of the things you have to have, I'm going to end where I started, resources. Those institutions were able to show how they were going to pay for those important programs. We all have to be able to pay. That's one of the things that we have to do when we're requesting new programs from the Board of Regents. And so there is a way to do it, but it does start with resources. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you for coming from Savannah this afternoon to join us. We've got President Kevin James from Morris Brown, who's going to speak. And then I had two additional people who signed up to give public testimony. And so I'm going to hope to get to the two of you as well.
Thank you, sir.
You
Thank
got
you,
it.
Chairwoman,
Dr.
for having me
James.
today, and to the committee. Thank you all so much. My name is Kevin James, and I am honored to serve as the 19th president of Morris Brown College, Georgia's first and only historical Black college that was founded by Black people for Black people. Back in 1881, a group of trustee members from Clark College, now known as Clark Atlanta University, approached the leadership of Big Bethel AME Church right on Auburn Avenue. And they asked the bishop of the church and the leadership of that church, can we use your church for classroom space? And one Stuart Wiley stood up, a layman on the board, stood up and said to the chairman of the board, the bishop of the church, Wesley John Gaines, if we can allow Clark College to use our church for classroom space, why don't we just start our own college? And the bishop stood up and said, with the help of God, we can and we will. These were former slaves having this conversation. And in 1881, Morris Brown College was founded here in the city of Atlanta, Georgia. My presentation is going to be much different from the previous conversations that you've heard today, because as you all know, Morris Brown College literally is coming out of the grave. 20 years ago, approximately 4 months after the movie Drumline was filmed on our campus, that grossed $50 million, 3 months after that, Morris Brown College lost its accreditation. Why? Because of some financial mismanagement of the then leadership regarding federal financial aid. Well, why did they do that? Because they did not have the resources to pay the bills. This was a death blow to Morris Brown College, as the institution literally went from 3,000 students to 50 students overnight. It was a death blow as the institution lost access to federal financial aid. But the institution never closed. The institution kept pushing forward. 3 years ago, I was sitting at home watching the news, and I saw where my predecessor resigned. And I literally out loud said, wow, I want to be the next president of Morris Brown College. I called the AME church and said, I just saw on the news where the president retired. How do I apply for the position? And the chairman of the board's assistant answered the phone. We had a conversation. At the end of that conversation, she said, send me your resume and put it directly in the chairman's hands. About a month later, I got an interview. When I got the interview to be the president of Morris Brown, I called several of my mentors and I said, I have an interview to be the president of Morris Brown College. What do you think about that? And my mentors, who are some of the top researchers of HBCUs in this country, said to me, Kevin, are you crazy? Don't you know that's never been done? What's never been done? No HBCU has ever been closed for 20 years and come out of that. Are you sure about this? And I thought about it for 3 or 4 seconds and I said, yes, I'm sure. And I went into my very first interview with the Board of Trustees at Morris Brown. And I said, not if you hire me, but when you hire me, this is what I'm going to do to save this institution. You fast forward 3.5 years later, and Morris Brown just made history as the first Black college to literally come out of the grave and earn our accreditation once again. Thank you. Not only did we get our accreditation back, but for the very reason that we lost our accreditation, our federal financial aid was reinstated this year. And now our students have access to all of the Pell Grants and other funding sources that they're going to need to be competitive and be able to attend college. Not only did we get our accreditation back, not only did we get our federal financial aid back, but in 3 months, we just got accredited this year, April 26th of this year. In about 3.5 months, we have gone from 20 students to over 250 students, growing 1,000% in one summer. So Morris Brown College is back. Morris Brown College is here to stay. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about where we have come from and what we're currently doing to move forward. So our priorities this year are come under several themes. The themes of governance, full accreditation, federal financial aid, financial stability, students, the student experience, enrollment growth, and significantly increasing our academic profile. Morris Brown College, through our accreditation, we want to take our time and grow slowly but strongly. And we have several degree programs. We have programs in business, psychology, music, and general studies. As we restored the institution, we didn't want to just concentrate on a 4-year program. We also wanted to create some certificates for those working adults who just needed a credential to be able to compete and move forward. So we have certificates in nonprofit management, entrepreneurship. The first institution in the state of Georgia with a degree and a certificate in esports, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry in which the gaming industry is just booming. You all know that we now have a professional esports team with the Atlanta Hawks. And the city of Atlanta is one of the top cities in the country for esports. A bachelor's degree in general studies, psychology, organization management, global management, and hospitality management and music. So, to this committee, where is Morris Brown today and what is our focus as we come literally out of the grave? Our top priority is funding. History will say that Morris Brown College was fully restored without any support. Did you hear what I just said? History will say that we restored the institution. What do you mean no support? What do you mean by that? I've been the president for about 4 years. And every funder that I met with, the first question they asked me was, how many students do you have? We have 20 students. Are you accredited? We're not accredited. Well, then I can't help you. How did you do it? We started this campaign called the Hard Reset. And I was able to galvanize our alumni in the African Methodist Episcopal Church to get back behind Morris Brown College, to support us, and we pulled ourselves up by our own bootstraps. That is how we did it. I am now looking for my first multi-million-dollar gift from a philanthropist, a corporation, funders, state funding, etc., to help catapult Morris Brown College into its future. We have demonstrated that we are an institution of quality. We have demonstrated that we can do for self. We have demonstrated that we are able to make history, like I mentioned earlier in this presentation. We're working right now to increase our alumni giving. We are now eligible for Title IV funding as well as Title III funding. So we're working on that first award. And we're working and hoping that the state of Georgia will support us by getting access to HOPE funding as well as dual enrollment for students in high school. One thing that makes Morris Brown College so unique is the fact that we were able to survive bankruptcy. We filed a $35 million bankruptcy just to live to see another day. $9.5 million to the United States Department of Education, $4.2 million to the AME Church, but yet we never closed our doors. Bankruptcy was supposed to kill us. It was supposed to be the end of us, but we were able to survive bankruptcy. Now that we were able to get to the other side, Morris Brown is the only institution that is literally 100% debt-free. Did you hear what I just said? Because we are debt-free, we are able to charge lower tuition. And Morris Brown College now is the most affordable HBCU in the city of Atlanta, one of the most affordable in the state of Georgia, and we are private. So because we are able to now right the ship and move our institution forward, and my goal to my board was that I want us to be the most affordable. It is my goal as the 19th president of Morris Brown, and I'm going to say something very boldly here, that 100%, did you hear what I just said? 100% of my students will graduate debt-free or with very little debt. We are going to change the way that higher education is funded moving forward. So much conversation right now regarding student loan debt. With our tuition only being $42.50, and the fact that most of our students are Pell eligible, we're hoping that our students will get the funding that they're going to need to be successful. Last thing I want to say about funding, it is my goal that Morris Brown College remains debt-free. As we move the institution through partnership, through collaboration, through what we have with 6 acres of land remaining. We once had 42 acres of land. We're going to move the institution forward and remain debt-free. Our focus this year is on academics. We just hired 7 full-time professors, 100% of them having a terminal degree. We're going to scale our academic programs this year. We're going to continue our enrollment growth. In one summer, we went from 50 students, we had 20 when I started, 50 students to 250 students in one summer without any resources for marketing and the like. Next year, we will double that. We'll have 500 students in 1 year of us being fully accredited. We're doing this with little to no funding, but we need the support from the state to help us to be able to compete. We're going to enhance our online programs, create fully online programs. COVID, like one of my colleagues said earlier, pushed us in the deep end of the pool when it came to online learning. With us having the most affordable education in the city, coupled with online learning, is absolutely going to impact working adults being able to complete a college degree. Now that we are accredited, we're able to take in transfer credits of those who are just needing to finish, okay? This year, our focus is on writing academic grants, partnering with the state of Georgia regarding technical college graduates coming to Morris Brown to complete their 4-year education. And we're implementing early alert programs to help those students who are underperforming. Most of the students at Morris Brown College are Pell eligible. One thing that makes Morris Brown College very unique, and it comes from a line from our alma mater, Pride of Earth, a haven for all hungry souls. That line from our alma mater, being a haven for all hungry souls, literally means that we will accept anyone who is desirous of going to college. Everyone can't say that they can go to a Harvard University. Everyone can't say that they can go to Georgia Tech. Everyone can't say they can go to Morehouse or Spelman. But we will welcome you here at Morris Brown College. For 141 years, we have been an institution of access for all, a haven for all hungry souls. And the second line of that alma mater says, and feeding them shall be our goal. We will pour into anyone who's desirous of bettering themselves, giving them a quality education so they can go out into the world and compete, be it into graduate schools or into the job workforce. Side button. All right, partnerships. Did my friend from the UNCF leave? It is our goal this year that Morris Brown College is considered to rejoin the United Negro College Fund. It is our goal this year, now that we are accredited again, that the Atlanta University Center will consider Morris Brown College being allowed back into the AU Center. We would like to continue to partner with those organizations who are going to help students to graduate with little to no debt. Did you know that the Atlanta public school system has a scholarship called the Achieve Atlanta Scholarship, in which if you had if you graduate with a 2.5 GPA, you will get $5,000 a year for 4 years to attend college. Well, with Morris Brown's tuition being $42.50, these funds will help aid students to not only be able to go to college, to again, complete college debt-free. That is our goal. We want to continue to partner with corporations and the working adult population and community. HBCUs, this is an area for opportunity for all, where we focus on that working adult populations. The for-profit colleges did a phenomenal job over the years of focusing on working adults. But now that we have online learning, now that we have night classes, now that we have weekend classes, HBCUs are able to tap into that market as well. We will continue to build strategic corporate partnerships. Some of you all may have heard that Morris Brown College just partnered with Hilton Hotels, in which we're building a $40 million hotel at Morris Brown College. We break ground in 3 weeks to build a $40 million hotel at Morris Brown. The bottom floor of that hotel will literally be classroom space for all of our hospitality students, all 4 years of their college career in hospitality, to work in that Hilton Hotel, to be educated in that Hilton Hotel. And by the time that they graduate, they have 4 years of direct experience learning how to own and operate hotels and restaurants. We want to continue these strategic partnerships. On yesterday, you all may have seen this in the news, that Morris Brown was just approved to once again participate with veteran benefits for the veterans. And so we anticipate that that is going to absolutely impact our enrollment as well. And we're working on international students getting approvals there as well. All right, campus life. We are a haven for all hungry souls. So again, we have a lot of students from different diverse backgrounds, some of those needing a second chance. But in addition to that, we want to create an academic environment that welcomes those individuals who have done very, very well. So we're creating an honors college at Morris Brown College. We're going to enhance our student life. We're restoring fraternities and sororities. We've revived our chapel services. We're building a choir, different student organizations. Again, I mentioned the Hilton Hotel that we're building. We're building a strong team and employee culture. And we want to promote and continue to work within the community. Morris Brown, with our location, has always been in the center of the Atlanta University Center, and I'm not afraid to say it. We are the heartbeat of the Atlanta University Center. There's so many people who have said, wow, things have just not been the same since Morris Brown's been gone. But guess what? We're back, and we are here to stay. I am going to be a voice this year. I've already published several articles, but I'm going to be a voice this year for our accreditor, the Transnational Association of Christian Colleges and Schools. There are 7 HBCUs that are accredited by this organization. We wanted to go back to our Christian roots of a Christian education. So we went back promoting Christian education, and we are now accredited by TRACS. A lot of people don't know what TRACS is, and so I'm going to be a voice this year for that. Scholarship. We're going to really, really dig deep into the scholarship. Again, I want to definitely, as president of Morris Brown, be involved with social and community issues. So to this committee, how can you support Morris Brown College? This is directly from my strategic plan. Institutional sustainability. Supporting our strategic enrollment, our growth, literally going from 20 students to 250 students was no easy feat. We need your support as we now continue to grow. Supporting our organizational excellence, academic excellence, being market responsive with innovative academic programs. We need that support. Technology. So many of my colleagues have talked about needing technological support and an integrated learning space. I mentioned to you in bankruptcy, Morris Brown literally went from 42 acres of land to 6. People are asking me, what are you going to do now that you don't have your land? You don't have a cafeteria. You don't have dorm space. What are you going to do? You're talking about growing. How are you going to do it? Well, we have something that we didn't have 20 years ago, and that's online learning. So we're going to utilize online learning and the technological space to be able to grow this HBCU. And then support maximizing our strategic partnerships in the community. This is where we need support. Again, I mentioned to you all that Morris Brown is very different. We have done something that no institution can say that they have done. And as a result of what we have been able to do, I have been personally contacted by 4 closed HBCUs that are at this very moment saying, wow, if you could do it, we could do it too. Knoxville College in Tennessee, literally right now, is working to reopen. Barbara Scotia in North Carolina, right now, this very moment, they just reopened with 10 students. St. Paul in Virginia, they're closed. They're right now working to reopen. Selma University in Alabama, right now, they're working to reopen. All because of this idea that it's possible. We saw Morris Brown do it. We now can do it as well. So that is my presentation. I welcome any questions. Thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from my committee members? Thank you so much. I did want to ask you, you had a slide there where you said that you needed the Georgia state law
Yes.
to meet up with federal law
Yes.
around accreditation. Can you just say a little bit about that?
Yes. For so long, accreditation agencies were governed by where they were located. So you've heard national accreditors and regional accreditors. SAC-COC is a regional, was once known as a regional accreditor. So much has changed in the last few years that in 2020, regarding online learning and where you're located, the United States Department of Education removed any distinction between what were once called regional accreditors and national accreditors. All accreditation agencies are governed by the same rigor with the United States Department of Education. So they removed the distinction, and now all of them are known as institutional accreditors. Well, the state of Georgia law, of course, for so many years, if you're in Georgia, you're accredited by SAC-COC. That, again, that requirement is now changing. You can be accredited by anyone that you want to be accredited by. So we're accredited by a different agency than is written in Georgia law. We want to align Georgia law now with what the federal law has said, and it is very simple to do. And our ask is that that is changed from regional accreditor SAC-COC to any institution approved by the United States Department of Education.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I
Excellent.
appreciate you.
All right, thank you all so much.
Thank you. We are starting to run real short on time, but I do want to give our 2 folks who signed up to give public testimony just a moment to address us. And I'm going to call up first Barbara Hill, if she's still here. Okay, then I'm going to move on to Ken Dandy, if he's still here. So then we are done. Any other? Yes? Yes. Do you want to come to the podium?
Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ken Dandy. I'm a 1991 graduate of Savannah State University. I live here in Southwest Atlanta. And, at Savannah State, we like to say you can get anywhere from here. Because of Savannah State, I've had the opportunity to live in many different places. My degree has taken me to many opportunities, LA, DC, and then, here in Atlanta. I was born and raised in Savannah. And to my Augusta people, I did graduate high school in Augusta, Georgia, West Side High School. But I want to say that I'm inspired, first of all, by all that I've heard today, especially from you college presidents. Man, you guys have a lot on your plate, and thank you for leading these institutions and leading us as a people. You just don't know how important that is. So thank you for that. And I'll just say also that as an alum and being a part of the university system of Georgia with Savannah State and also the other public HBCUs there, Albany State and Fort Valley State, I am also involved with the Hbcus, which is an annual conference that's hosted by these three schools together. We are in dire need of, equity. We really are. I've heard about different programs like engineering and some of these other things. Yes. And security too. I would say that our schools are deserving of the same quality and investment that you're giving to the other schools. You would never allow UGA to ever be in a position where its security is lacking, is a danger or a detriment to the students or the faculty. The same should also be allowed for Savannah State University, Albany, and any other schools. The university system has to do a better job of really putting its money where its mouth is, if you will, in terms of it's not just talking about supporting HBCUs, but actually putting the investment in our schools. We really need that. We need your help, legislators, to get the university system to do just that. I will say also that I remember I think it was a similar study back in 2018 with this committee where there was a recommendation for an advisory council to be added in the university system, to be made up of, I guess, maybe representatives from the university, from the HBCUs especially. It was supposed to be suggested that it be patterned after the program in Louisiana, which was at the time. And I would like to see more action in that area, just so that we can have a seat at the table. We only have one African-American represented on the University System of Georgia Board of Regents, and that person did not graduate from any HBCU in this state. They're from Atlanta, but we need some folks who know what our schools really need and who walk the soil, if you will, of these schools. We need that. So I would offer that as a challenge to the committee to really and truly help us get more action on that, and in that area. Of course, as alums, we're doing all we can. We can't do it alone. We need the system to work like it's supposed to work for all of us. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. That is everything for today. I want to say again, thank you everybody for being here and participating, whether you're in this room or watching online in this discussion. This is the first of several other meetings that will happen. We do have a meeting scheduled on the books for next month, September 27th at Fort Valley State University. That date may very well shift, so be on the lookout for the date change, but it will be at Fort Valley State University, our only other land-grant university and public institution. And then we will come back to Atlanta in October. We're looking at the end of October, probably the 24th of October, and we will be at one of our private institutions here, and that will be hosted by President and French at Clark Atlanta University. So we have those meetings set up. Be on the lookout for actual meeting notices, and we will continue the conversations that we've started today and dig in more deeply around the ideas of, economic impact, economic development, community development, as well as workforce development as we continue the discussions moving forward. Do either one of my committee members have any comments, anything else for the good of the order? Yes.
I will say, Madam Chair, first, thank you for bringing in the perfect group of leaders to speak on behalf of HBCUs. This is the beginning of this conversation. I do believe that the more we educate and the more we advocate, we will come to a solution that is hopefully balanced for our HBCUs. And I just look forward to our next few meetings and to continue the conversation. And so thank you for all who came to support the conversation. And hopefully you'll be around to put your hands in this work and help us put the right ingredients and get the right outcome.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you so much for your time, everybody. This meeting is now adjourned.